modifier because each of them is a bit different. Okay, and now let's create a new file in here in the components and call it composition.scss. And then don't forget to add it here in the main file. Otherwise, you may forget it a bit later. So import components/composition. And here we go. So save and close. And here we go. So what styles do we want for the composition? Well, actually not much, at least not for now. So let's continue with nesting further down. So photo. So these are our elements. So composition, photo. And actually let's now take a look at how they look like without any styling. And so you see that it simply puts them one after the other here down here. Well, actually I see these are very low quality pictures, and that's not the one that I want to use right now. So let's just charge this here to large. I think I remember there was like a large version of these. Let me check it. Large and large. Yeah, that's much better. So these are the high quality images that we want. And we're going to talk about responsive images a bit later, where we then can change this according to screen size and resolution, but let's leave that for later. So anyway, what we want to do now is to actually style these photos. And so let's start with the width and set it to 55%. Then we want them to have a box shadow as well. 0 in the X, and usually this is always 0, at least almost always I would say. Then 15 pixels here, and now some nice big blur of 40 pixels, so 4 rem. And the color black with, let's say, 40% opacity. Okay, we want to give them a little border radius as well. That should look nice and clean and modern. And so let's take a look at how they are looking right now. So already looking close to what we have in our original, but we want them to be on top of one another. And so how do we actually do that? Do you have an idea? Well, I would say that the best way to do it is to use absolute positioning. Okay, so let's do that. So position absolute. And remember that as soon as we set the position to absolute on an element, these elements will be placed according to a reference. And the reference is the first parent that it encounters, which has its position set to something. Now, since we want this reference to be the composition, so we want it to be positioned according to this composition element, of course, we set this one to position relative. Okay. And so now this has position relative. And so the reference, the 0, 0 coordinate, will be on the top left corner of this composition element, right? So let's now place these images in different places. And the way we can do that is to select them one by one. And that's why we have these modifier classes, right? So P1, and then the same for the others. Well, let's copy it later actually. So we just have to define a left and a top now. So let's say left of 0 and the top of, well, I could do 0, but let's make it actually -2 rem. And so this will move it upwards. Okay, let me just show you how it's going to look like. So this is the one. And I did it so that this image here actually is a bit on top of this text, so it's not in the same line. This would maybe look a bit strange. So now it's a bit up higher than this line of the text. So this one here is at 0, -2, and the other ones are at 0, 0, which remember is this top left corner of the composition element, which is this one here behind all of this. Okay, let's now take a look at how we have it here. Okay, so this one, then this one, and then this one. So let me copy this. And you know why this actually works, right? So composition, then photo, then P1, P2, and P3. So this helps us basically compose these class names that we have here, like composition, photo, P1, P2, P3. So let's put this one here to the right side 0. And so what this will do is that it will start at the right side, so moving 0 pixels from the right side of the container. And then the top, let's put it 20 pixels from the top. Okay, let's check it out again. And all right, so that is the second one. So let's not change the third one as well. And I will put it even further down, so 10 RAM. And then from the left, let's put it actually in a percentage value here. So why not? So 20% from the left. And so here we are. So this is how this looks like. Of course, once again, I encourage you to play around with these numbers. I already knew the way that I wanted to place this, and so I knew how I wanted the numbers to look like. But you, of course, can experiment with them and change them, right? Okay, and now we're ready to implement the hover effect that we saw here on the page. So again, it creates this green border and it zooms in on this image and zooms out on the remaining images as soon as we hover over one of them, okay? So let's now implement that. Now just one word about why we used all these percentages here, okay? It's because of something that I talked about a couple of lectures ago, which are one of these ingredients of responsive web design. So one of them is flexible images. And so we always have to define the width of images in percentages if possible, because this way it will nicely scale with the viewport. And the same thing here applies with the left distance that I wanted here. It's also in percentages. Let me just very quickly show it to you. Without even any media queries here already, we see that this adapts nicely to the page. Well, actually this is not, sorry, this is the original version, of course. So you see that it decreases and it's not overlapping the text. So of course it's missing the media queries to make it look better on other screen sizes, but it's more than enough for now. What matters is that we already defined it in percentages to start with. Okay, but let's now implement the hover effect, okay? So hover, and what we want to happen is, of course, the zooming. So transform, scale, and I will scale it to 1.05. So not a big difference, just like a subtle difference, but still clearly visible. Then the box shadow is also going to change, because if it's now bigger, it should give the impression that it's closer up to the user, and so it should cast a bigger shadow. And so let's increase that shadow, okay? So bigger shadow and also a bit darker. And now the third thing was that it overlaps all of the other images. And so how do we do that? How do we say that if we have 3 images, we want one of them to be on top of all the others? Well, we use the z-index, right? And so let's set a z-index on all of the regular images. So z-index, and let's simply put something like 10. It's not really important. Then here we set one that is higher. So z-index 20, for example, okay? And so now this one will always have the highest z-index, and therefore it should be displayed on top. And now just for the animation effect, a transition of all the properties in 0.2 seconds. All right, let's take a look. And yeah, so what we just implemented actually works just fine. Now let's take care of that green border stuff. Now you see that there's a space between the border and the images, right? It's not just a border, and that's actually not so easy to implement, at least not with the CSS properties that everyone knows. And that's what I'm going to show you, some lesser known CSS properties. So first up, we set the outline property here in the hover state. So outline, and let's say we want 15 pixels, so 1.5 rem. Then we stated solid, and then the color. So our green color. And this is similar to setting it to a border. So if we had border, then it would look, for now, it would look the same. So this is it. It would look like this. But with the outline, we can do something that we cannot with the border. And that is the outline offset. So outline offset. And we can say we want 20 pixels here. So 2 rem. And then it will give us this space between the border, or we should actually call it the outline, and the element on which the outline is applied. And this is it. It actually also zooms in a bit like the image. And so this is the effect that we have. Well, not exactly, because what's missing here now is that the other images decrease in size. So let's do that final thing as well. And do you have any idea how we could actually pull this off? How we could implement this thing? It's not really easy, but it's actually just a one-line selector. So what should this selector look like? Maybe take a second and try to think about what happens and how we could write down the selector for this, okay? So I want you to pause the video and think about it. And if you don't come up with a good solution, it's no problem at all. But what I want you to do here is to think, okay? Thinking is really important because CSS is not just some stupid or dull language. You also have to think and come up with solutions for these different stuff that you want to do. So let's try that. All right, did you manage to do it? Again, if not, no worries, it's absolutely no problem. It's not really expected at this point because again, this is rather complex. Now, this is how we do it. So, hover on the composition actually. So, we start with the hover state on the entire composition. So as soon as we hover the composition element, then select the photo that's nested inside of it, and then select the one that is not hovered. And it's as simple as that. Okay, does that make sense? Let me actually write this out for you here outside as a comment, just to make it a bit more visible. So composition. So this is what this looks like. So when we hover the composition, then select the composition photo, which is not hovered. So this maybe looks a bit crazy, but it works. And let me show it and prove it to you. Transform, scale, and let's scale it down just a little bit, or maybe 0.9, so we can see it better. And yep, so it works. So notice that it happens as soon as we enter any of these elements. And so the other ones are not hovered, and so they shrink exactly like we determined. And 9 is actually a bit too much, so let's set it to 95 again. Reload, and that's the effect we were looking for, right? Let's compare it. Yep. Actually, this one is a bit more complete, and that's because we just left out one single small thing, because in here we not only scale it, but we can also translate it a bit in the Y direction, so we can move it up a little bit. So just move it up by 5 pixels, and it will make the animation look even a bit cooler, okay? Yeah, you see how it gets bigger and it also comes up a bit? That's it. All right, really cool. And again, you could do all kinds of crazy stuff here. You could rotate the elements and whatever you wanted, of course, transform all of the stuff. But that's not what we're looking for here. What we wanted to do is this section, and it's now done. It looks like the one in our original version. It has slightly different text, but that's not a problem. And so we hit our goal for these couple of lectures, all right? So I hope that you're enjoying the course. If you are, I would appreciate some feedback, of course. That's always 100% welcomed. No matter if it's good feedback or not so good, maybe you have something to improve in the course. Just let me know, write me a message, an email, anything. Just let me know what you think of the course, okay? Anyway, see you soon in the next lecture. Ready for another session on the Natures project? Then get ready to learn how to include and use an icon font in a project. You'll also learn another way of creating this skewed section design that is all over our page, like in our header. So this non-rectangular design. And plus, you're gonna learn how and when to use the direct child selector. So we have these 4 columns here going on, and when we hover we have this nice effect. And then in each of these boxes, we have like the 4 features of this company, so of Natures. So explore the world, meet nature, find your way, and live a healthier life. And then below that is the text, and here on top, an icon, and you see this gradient going on here, just like we have in here. So we're gonna do it the same way. And you see this non-rectangular design here that I was talking about earlier. So it's here, and so these lines. But we're gonna leave that for the end. Let's actually start by downloading and including this icon font that we have here, so that we can use some icons in our web page. And the icon font I'm using here is called Linear Free Icon Set. So just head over to linear.io, and then in here you can simply download all sets. And then just wait for download to finish. And so let's take a look at what we have here, okay? So you can take a look at all of these icons, but what we want is actually here in this basics section. So this basics icon pack, and then we want a font. We could just use images like these PNG images here, but that is not a good practice because images do not nicely scale up and down when we scale our web page. But if we have an icon font, then these are vectors, and then no matter how much we would zoom in on the page, the icons will always remain nice and sharp and crisp, and so no problem there. We could also use this SVG format here, and actually we're going to do that in the next project, but that's even more advanced than using an icon font. So we're leaving that for the next project, okay? So let's use this icon font here. And so what we need is this styles.css file and this fonts folder, because this is actually where the icons live. So in this Linear Basic 10 font. So let me just copy these two, go to our desktop, and then to our project folder. Now I want to head into CSS, and this is where I am copying it. And now let's just rename this one here to icon font, so that it's not too similar here to style. Okay, and so that's it actually. Now all we have to do is to, of course, include it in the HTML in our markup. So let's do that very quickly. And we'll actually do it here before our custom CSS. So link, and then the power of Emmet, CSS, and iconfont.css. And that's it. Our icon font is now included in the page. Let's just very quickly take a look at this CSS file so that we understand a little bit about how this actually works. So this starts by including these fonts that are here in this fonts folder, right? So these 4 fonts, these are just different formats because different browsers can read different font formats. And so we have to use all of these 4 so that the icon font is going to work on all of the browsers. So what this does is here it includes all of these fonts, and then it defines the font family as calling Linear Basic 10. And then basically what happens down here is that this gives us one class for each of the icons which are included in this icon pack. So it gives us all of these classes like icon basic accelerator, icon basic alarm, icon basic anchor, and so on and so forth. So all of these. Now it's not really important to understand how this works. It doesn't really matter for us. We just want to use this, okay? Just wanted to very quickly give you an overview about how this works. So again, all of the fonts are included, and then based on that font, it will give us one class for each icon that we can use. So all we have to do is to include this class, and it will give us the icon. All right, so let me show you how to do that. But before, of course, we need to start writing our section. So we have a section, and I'm going to call it section features. Okay, and now in this section, let me just demonstrate how we can use the icons that we just included. So we need to add one of the classes that I just showed you to an element. And it doesn't really matter what element it is. And so it's become like a convention to use the I element, okay? And this doesn't stand for icon, okay? Some people, they confuse it, but this I doesn't stand for icon. It actually stands for italic. So in previous versions of HTML, this I was used to make text italic, okay? Now we no longer use it, and so we can use the I for our icons. So let's actually open the folder again that we downloaded from the download, because in here we have an image where we have all our icons. But well, they don't really have a name, so okay, it's not really useful. But we can still open this icons reference, and then in here, it should then work. So which one do we want to use? We want to use, for example, this world icon here. And okay, down here it is. So basic world. So I just copied this name, which is the class name, And so class, basic world, and now let's take a look. Well, nothing really happened, okay. Reload it again, and let's go back. Okay, I remember that all of these icons, they started with the icon prefix, right? So icon basic book, pencil. So let's add that here as well. And on each icon font that you're going to download, it's always going to be a bit different. So you always have to experiment a bit with it. But now you see it works. So it's really small, okay, down here, but here in the corner, but I hope you see it, okay? So it is actually working. Now all we have to do is to actually write all of that markup so that it looks like this in the end, okay? So let's start by actually doing that. Leave this here, and we come back to it later. So basically this is very simple actually. All we need here is a row with 4 columns in it. And then each of these columns can have a feature box in them. So with Emmet again, we do it like this. Row, then call 1 of 4. And I could actually do this 4 times now to fill everything up at the same time. But let's just do it like this, only with one of the columns, okay? And actually I forgot the dot to make it a class. And then in here, let's put a feature box. All right, and there it is. And so this feature box will be one of these boxes here. So remember that before, so in this section here, we wrote this content here directly into the column. So remember that? So here we had this column in here, and then in here we directly put these elements. So the H3, the piece, and so on. Now this time we're not doing it like that. We're creating another box right in here. And we do that first because we want to have more space between them than the gutter, but more importantly, it's because we want this effect to happen like this. And so we want this entire feature box to scale up when we hover it. And it's better to then create a separate element for that rather than manipulating this kind of stuff on our columns. So we never want to touch these columns here, okay? The code for the grid should remain unchanged, no scaling on there, no adding additional padding. If we want anything like that, we just add another box in there, okay? So what do we have in each of these boxes? We have an icon, and let's actually grab that one. What's going on here? Okay. Then we have an H3, so a tertiary heading, and you see that this one is exactly the same as this, and so we can reuse this code, of course. So H3 dot heading tertiary. Explore the world, it's the first one. And then after that, it's simply a paragraph called feature box text. All right, and here we actually should add another class because it's a feature box icon. So feature box is the name of the block here, okay? And an icon is the name of the element. Okay, as for this text, let's just copy a bit of this text here. And maybe that's enough already. And so let's paste it in here. All right. And so, yeah, so this should be enough already. Now, as you can already guess, probably, this feature box here should be a component. So a building block that can be reused throughout our page. So let's create a new folder for that. I'm actually copying it, so I can now just do it like this. And then don't forget to include it. Import components and feature box. Give it a save, and then we can already close it again. And here again, feature box, and that's it. Now, the other selector is the feature box icon, and the other one is the feature box text, I believe. And so, yeah, that should be enough. Let me just take a look at how this looks in here. And all right, so we have the H3, the paragraph, and the icon, which is still very small, of course, but they're already sitting here nicely in one of these columns. So let's go back and close what we no longer need here, typography, variables we can keep open. And now what I want you to do next, or what we can do together next, is to actually add this section here. So the section about the feature box. So the section features. And let's start by add some padding. So padding, let's say 200 pixels. So 20 rem and then 0 left and right. So it's really modern right now to have really spacey websites. So with lots of white space, that's really modern and trendy right now. And I think it looks great actually. So another thing we have in this section here, in case you haven't noticed yet, is once again we have one of these background images with this gradient going on, just like here. And so instead of writing it all over again, I'm actually just going to copy it because we already know how to do that. So that's not really a need to do it all again. So what we need is this background image stuff here, right? And yeah, so here it is. So we have a linear gradient with this green color here. Now this color picker here no longer works because of the SASS variable, but don't worry, everything is right. So the light green to the dark green to the right bottom. Now what's different here is the image, and this time it's called net4, net4.jpg. Okay, and what we also want, like almost always I would say, is the background size set to cover, so it nicely covers the entire section. All right, let's take a look at that now. And yeah, so that's very nice already. And it's good enough for now. So let's continue now with these boxes here. And then as the finishing touch, we will skew the entire design to make it look like this one here with these non-rectangular sides, okay? So the feature box. We want it to be white and a bit transparent at the same time. So let's do that. So background color. And so we use an RGBA once again. Color white. And then let's say we want 80% of it to be white. Basically like an opacity of 20%. Because what this means is that we can see through 80%. And so the remaining 20% is like what you can see through the color. Now the font size that we want is 1.5 because I experimented with 1.6 rem, but it's way too big actually. It doesn't look really natural, it doesn't look good. Now we also want some padding in these boxes. So 2.5 rem, so basically 25 pixels. We want the text in them to be centered, if you remember that. And we want them to have a nice border radius. Really a small one, so nothing too much, because that would look weird and not modern, but a very small one then again looks modern. And now finally a box shadow, because that also is a huge design trend that's going on right now, and so that's why I included it in this course. So you probably already know that I care a lot about great design, and that's why I built all my courses actually around these cool designs. And I try to make this project as attractive as possible to you so that it's more fun for you to code. All right, so this is all pretty straightforward and pretty easy. It's nothing really new to you anymore. And so, yeah, this looks pretty good already. Well, what's missing here is to give this some more space, just like we did up here, and then to just format the icon, right? So first, let's use the utility class that we used up here. So we want this small margin at the bottom going on here as well. So where is that? Yeah, so right here. Okay, and now we want to style the feature box icon. And so it's already here. And so let's write some code for it. The first thing we want to do is to increase it. And so remember that this is effectively a font. And so we can say font size in order to change the size of the icon. So font size 6 rem, which is a lot, but it actually is the correct size. We want it to have a margin to the bottom, like 5 pixels, so 0.5 rem. And so let's now take a look at how it looks and what our goal is for this icon. So I think I mentioned before that once again this has this really nice gradient here going on, just like it has in here. And do you remember how we do that? Well, if you do, then this is the challenge for this section. So try to code up this gradient here just like we did before. And so pause the video and I'll be waiting for you to do that. So, did you manage to do it? I really hope so. Now I'm not going to do it, I will just copy what we did before. So I'm a bit lazy here this time. So it's here in the typography, I remember, and it is here in the heading. So background image, actually it starts in here because we want the gradient to go from one side to the other only. And then all of this. Close it, put it here, and it should already be enough. So it's now an inline block. It has this background image, which is this gradient from green to green, light to dark green, and then it clips that gradient by the text. And remember that once again we can do this because the icon font is text, in fact, okay? And so once again we can use color because it is text. So let's check out if this is already working. And indeed, here it is. So, great. That's exactly how we want this to look like. The only thing that's missing now is this hover effect. So it goes up a little bit when we hover and then it goes back down. Actually, it doesn't only go up, it also scales, right? So what we need here is to add a line of code here where we say when we hover the feature box. So what happens, of course, is a transform. And you're already noticing that we're using transform all the time. And that's because it's really an amazing property. It allows us to do so many stuff. So we wanted to move up. And so by now you already know that we do that by using translate Y, right? So in the Y direction. And then let's just scale it up just a tiny little bit, like 1.03, just like this. All right, so let's check that out. Okay, and of course we're missing the transition here. So transition, and now we can actually write the property that we want to animate because it's just one. Transition, and let's do an animation of 0.3 seconds this time. All right, actually we don't even need this selector here because we're not formatting the code at all. So you're maybe asking why this then has the font size that we specified. And well, it does so because of inheritance, right? So we defined the font size here in the feature box of 1.5 rem, and then the paragraph, which is a child of the feature box, simply inherits this font size. So we just have to define it on the parent, and then it will automatically inherit. Okay, and so now it should work as expected. Well, not really. Let me check out why that is. Well, of course, it's transform here. What a silly mistake. But that happens all the time, okay? As you're coding, it's absolutely normal to make mistakes. And that's something you can't avoid, and it's not a problem, okay? I do these mistakes, you probably do these mistakes, and everyone does this kind of silly mistakes. Okay, and so what we have to do now is to just complete our markup here. Well, what's going on in here? I'm not really sure. I don't think there's any mistake. Well, that's this div, that's this one, that closes here, and that closes here. Well, it's a weird formatting, but I'm not gonna fix that right now, okay? What I want now is to check out this font reference here. So the next one that we want is the compass. So where is that? It's probably just called compass anyway. So yeah, so here it is. So this one here is called compass. Actually, no need to even copy anything or paste. So the compass, then the next one, let's take a look. It's the map and then the heart, okay? So map, that's right. And then let's just check if there's a heart. All right, so heart. So map and heart. And the text that we have for these, the first one was explore the world. The next one is meet nature. Then we have find your way. And finally, live a healthier life. So let's check it out. All right, so here we go. Well, something that is weird here is this really small space that we have here between these boxes. It's different than this one here. So let me just check this out. So everything looks good, but yeah, okay, I see. So here we have this small margin, this really small margin, only to RAM. And I remember that we changed this where I demonstrated you how great it is to have a variable to set the gutter of the grid. So yeah, so it's here. So I set this to 2, but originally it was at 6. So let's set it back to 6 now and then take a look. And okay, yeah, so this looks better now. And actually up here, I also thought before that it was really close. And now I know why that was, because it was also because of this small gutter. Now we have a bit too much text here. Let's just delete a couple of words so that it looks more natural like it did before. But here everything is great now. So the next step is to put it like this. So to skew this entire section. Okay, so this was just a small mistake, just a small bug that I forgot to fix. All right, just delete some words from here. And so, yeah, let's go back to the feature box, or actually to the home file, because it's here in the section features definition where we are going to take care of the skewed design, right? So how are we going to do that? So maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is to again use the clip path property that we used before on the heading. And yeah, we could theoretically do that and it would be okay, but I wanted to show you another nice trick. And that is the following. So what we can do is to simply skew the entire section. So we use a transform and we used skew before. So skew, and we want to do it in the Y direction. So let's set it to -7 degrees. And I'm going to show you the differences in a second in the inspector, okay? So let's just check it out here. And so here we go. Don't worry about this one, we're going to fix it in a second. But now this is what it looks like. All right, so let me just show the different values to you. So -7 looks like this. So from 0 it would be like this. And if we put positive values, it starts skewing in this direction, okay? But with the negative value, it then moves like upward, so it skews upward. And that shows -7 simply because visually it looks like this is the same inclination now as this one, okay? So it's just a visual thing. Now, 2 things that we have to fix here. First up, since we are skewing all of this, we now created this white gap here, okay? So what can we do about that? We simply move up the entire thing a couple of pixels here, a couple of rams, so that it covers all of this white. And the next thing is then to, of course, put these back in their original position. And let's actually start with that. So how do you think we're going to do that? Well, the most intuitive thing to do is to simply skew these in the opposite direction, right? And that's what we're going to do. So we skewed the entire section by -7 degrees. And so let's just skew these boxes by 7 degrees. So they basically just skew back. And now we could go ahead and go here to the feature boxes and then implement that here. So put the skew and put 7 degrees. But we're going to do it differently. Because imagine that one day we want to put something else here in the section features. Okay, so imagine we add a couple of other boxes with different names or something. And then what would we do? We would then have to add that transform in this new content as well. And so we don't want to do that. And so what I'm going to do is that I will show you a new selector, which is the direct child selector. So let's write it like this. So ampersand and then direct child, and the direct childs that I want to select are all of them. And so the universal selector here. So universal selector simply selects everything, but only everything that is a direct child of the section features. Okay, and that's it. So let me demonstrate to you how it would look like in compiled CSS. So basically section features and then direct childs, all of them. And why do we have to use this direct child? So if we would just do it like this, we would select all the childs, right? Not only the direct childs, but simply all the children element. And we don't want to do that. We only want to select the direct children. So in the HTML, let me take a look. So the direct children is actually only one child, and it's that one, so it's the row. And so basically what this command does is it takes this element here and it skews the row by -7 degrees. Well, we haven't written that, but we will. And yeah, of course it's here. And so let's simply do it like this. All right, let's take a look. And indeed, here we go. Let me check it in the inspector here as well. So you see that in here, this is where it applies. In here, it does not apply. It only applies here, right? So if we take this out, it looks like it did before. And if we put it back, then of course it's skewed. So again, it's skewed basically in the other direction to compensate for the skewing of the entire section. Now, if we didn't have the selector like this, let me actually change it. So without the direct child, then everything would be skewed as well. And so now you have this one here skewed, so it looks really weird now. So this one is now skewed, this box, and then in there, the 3 elements are also skewed. So these here are like triple skewed, so they are skewed 3 times because the parent is skewed and the parent of that one is skewed as well, and so it's really weird. So you see now, well, it doesn't appear here. But anyway, yeah, so that's what would happen if we would not have used the direct child. So again, the direct child will only select the first child that it comes across, basically, and then apply the styles that we put in there. All right. And so, yeah, this was another way of doing this skewed section design. Now, of course, this image here is now skewed. Okay. It doesn't look the same way it looked before, but you don't really notice that. So it's not really a big problem. All right. And now what we just have to do is to move up the entire thing a little bit. And let's do that by trial and error, basically. So section features. So let's just simply apply a negative margin here, okay, to the top. So margin top minus 10 rem. So we're starting with 10 rem, and let's see how far we have to go. And so, yeah, so it already is covering now the other section exactly like we want it to look like. Let me take a look. So, well, this is actually it. And for some reason, I cannot manipulate this right now. Well, what's happening here? Let me reload the page. All right, so for some reason that didn't work, but it does now. So with 11, it doesn't really work. 9. So with 9, you already see this white thing here. So just to be sure, let's leave it at -10 rem, okay? And so now we're good to go. Okay, now we see that by doing this, we don't have a lot of space here in this section, right? So this is really close, but I think it's still all right. We can leave it like that. Okay, and maybe if in the end it does look strange, we can then do a final adjustment of that, okay? And so I think that is it. That's everything I had to show you for this lecture. So I'm showing you a lot of different things. As you can see, I'm showing you a lot of selectors, a lot of new properties, basically a lot of new tools for your CSS toolkit. And I'm doing that because I want you to be able to use all these tools in your future websites. So I hope you're really following this and understanding this, because I don't want you to just copy my designs when you start building your own websites. I want you to truly and deeply understand exactly what I'm doing and the tools I'm giving you, so that you can then use them in your own designs and coming up with your own designs as well. So with all of this, I want to give you tools and I want to make you think about how everything works. And yeah, in the end, just make you a capable CSS developer. So that is really my goal with all of this. Okay, but enough talk. See you next time. Hey there, and welcome back. The section we're about to build now is my absolute favorite in this entire project. And that's because in this section, you're going to learn how to build an amazing rotating card effect. And to do so, you'll learn how to use the perspective and backface visibility properties in CSS. Plus, you're going to use background blend modes, and you'll also learn how and when to use the box decoration break property. So there are like 200 lines of SASS code in this section alone. So let's get to work. And here is what we're going to build in this section. So we have the 3 cards here, and as soon as we hover them, they rotate like this. So I showed you this before, but now that we're going to build it, let's take a look at it again. So we hover, then we rotate, and when we hover this button here, of course, we have this effect. And yeah, and also in this section we have, of course, this H2 here going on, and then at the end, this button. So let's start by formatting this section here with this gray background color here that you see. And then, of course, putting the secondary heading here. And we can also start implementing the row here, because you see that these are 3 equally sized cards. And so we're using the columns from our grid again that we coded before. So let's start by implementing these things, okay? So back to our code. Let's start with the index.html file, okay? This one is going to be called section tours. Once again, a section element, and then with the name of section tours. So class section tours. All right. Then what we need now is the secondary heading, and I'm not going to write the code again. I'm just going here and copy it because it's actually the exact same thing. And so let's put it here. Once again, it has this weird formatting going on. All right, and so the title here should be most popular tours. Okay, and then we can also put a row with 3 columns in there as well. So let's just copy them from here. And here we go. All right. And now we can then style this section tours here, okay? And we're going to do that once again here in our home file. Let's get rid of that actually. And so this one is going to look a bit like the section about. So let's actually copy the background and the padding, and we're going to adjust this padding probably a little bit later on. But for now, let's leave it at 25 pixels like this. And so let's now take a first look. And so yeah, so here we go. Now once again we have this problem here with the white space, so we should probably move up this entire thing here, and then let's give it some more space here down there just for now, so we can see clearly what's going on here when we're coding our cards. So we have it nicely in the middle of the page and not here in the bottom, okay? So 25 then at the top, 0 on the right side, and now let's say in the bottom we want like 50 RAM at least. And then on the left side, 0 as well. And then we should also move up this entire section a bit, such as we did with the section features. So let's take a look if 10 RAM is actually enough. And yeah, seems so. Let's just inspect. And yeah, so here we go. So the section now goes until this point, and that's totally okay. All right, so let's now start to implement our card component. Because again, I'm going to define a card as a component so that we can theoretically later reuse it on the page. So let's start with the very basic functionality, all right? So a new file, card.scss, and then don't forget to implement it here. And card. Give it a save. And of course you also need it in the HTML, right? And so here in this column. So once again, we're not touching the column in any way. We're creating a separate div just for the card. Let's just put some text here. So again, this is just for testing purposes for now, just to implement the basic functionality, all right? So let's start by giving it some background color, okay? Background color, orange red. So for testing, I really like this color. And some height as well. Let's say 50 RAM. And just for testing, that should be enough. Now, what actually happens when we hover the card element? Well, all it does actually is to basically rotate 180 degrees. So half of a circle, right? So a circle is 360 degrees, and so 180 degrees is half a circle. So half a rotation. Because if you take a look here, that is what happens, right? It only rotates half of a circle, basically. You see? So it's not 360 degrees, it's 180 degrees. And it rotates across the y-axis, right? So remember, this here is the y direction from top to bottom, and this is the x direction. And so the axis of this rotation is the y direction, so the y-axis. And so we have a rotate y. Okay, so let's implement that. So we'll transform once again, and then rotate. And you see that we have this different rotates here, so according to the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. And as I explained, I want the y-axis, and I want 180 degrees. Okay, now we of course need to give it some animation. So transition, and we'll put all here because we're probably gonna have more later on, and then 0.5 seconds, let's say. Or we can actually make more, like 8.8 seconds, so that it takes a bit longer, we have more time to see what's happening. Okay, so let's take a look. And it's actually already kind of working, you saw that? So it rotates, and we can then see the text here from the other side, basically. So from the back, you see this text here, it's inverted. Now it says like, starting from here, card text. You cannot really see it really well, maybe, but that's actually what's happening. Now the effect that we have on the original looks a bit nicer, right? So let me show it. Because what happens is that it appears that it actually moves towards you, right? So it's like it's coming out of the page and towards you, towards the user. You see that? And that is called perspective. So take a look at this one and now compare it with this one. Okay, it looks completely different, right? And that is called perspective. And so in CSS, we can actually define that perspective, okay? So let's do that. And the way we have to do it is to actually define the perspective on the parent element of the one where the transform, where the rotation occurs. So the perspective has to be on the parent. And what that means is that we should define the perspective property in here on the card, and then have a child element for this rotation here, okay? So let's now first add the perspective property here. Perspective. And now in here we have to put a really huge number of pixels. So let's go with 1500, so 1500 pixels. So like this. So I will put 150 RAM. And I will show you some differences in a second. But for now, let's continue. Okay, and actually, to make this work in Mozilla Firefox as well, we have to use the Moz prefix. Okay, so let me add that one as well. All right, and so now it will work in Firefox as well. So this is once again quite of a new property here, and so it's not already implemented in all of the browsers. Okay. Now remember how we had to now put these properties here on a child element of the card. Okay, so let's actually do that. So we want a new div here, and I'm calling it the card side because it's one side of the card. And later we will then add another side. Okay. So just text here. So again, this is the block, and then this is the element in the BEM notation, right? So card side. Here it is. Okay, let's actually close this one. We're done with it. And so card side. All right. Now this here also has to change, of course. And so the way we're going to do that is to say that when we hover the card, then we want the side to transform. Okay, does that make sense? Let me write that out to you again so it makes more sense. So we hover the card, right? And when the card is hovered, then the card side will be transformed. And we do not put the hover here directly on the card side because later we will have more sides. And actually it makes more sense that we really want to hover. We want this effect to occur when we hover the main component, so the main block. So when we hover the card, that's when our effect starts taking place. Okay, so let's now take a look. Let's actually make the text a bit bigger here, just now for testing purposes again. Color white. I'm just going to write it like this because I will delete it in a second. And font size 2 rem. Alright, and so now let's hover it. And yeah, so that looks much nicer, right? You see, now it also looks as if it was moving towards you already, okay? So that's much better than it was before. Now I wanted to show you how it looks like with different values of perspective. So let's come here to the parent element and change that. For example, imagine we only had put 15 rem. Then it would be this crazy effect. Whoa, what's going on here? So it's not really clear how these values here affect our perspective, but basically the lower the value, the more dramatic the perspective is, okay? So let's put a really high number here right now. And so now it looks almost as we had it in the beginning, so we don't see any perspective effect at all. And so this is kind of a bit of experimentation until you get it right, until you get the look that you want for it, okay? So we now have implemented this side of the card, but actually we have two sides, right? So again, you can see that we see the back part of this card now here because the text is now the other way around. So basically we're seeing the card now from behind, but that's not really what we want, right? So what we have here is that basically we see one card side in the beginning, and then when we hover it, we see the other card side. So let's now implement that in our HTML and CSS. So we have another card side. So let's put here front and back. And so now we need a way to distinguish them. And so what I'm going to do is to add a modifier. So card side front and then card side back. All right. So now we have a front side and a back side. Very simple. So front side and a back side. So let's actually give each one a different color here. And this one is going to be just green, let's say. Now think about what does it mean that this side here is the back side. So what's the difference between this back side and the front side? Can you imagine that? Well, the difference is that the back side in the beginning is already rotated, right? So it's already 180 degrees on the back. And then as soon as we hover the card, then it moves to 0, okay? Does that make sense? So let me implement that and show it to you. Okay. So before we hover the card, this back side is already flipped basically, right? So it's already at 180 degrees. And so now we have to change this hover thing here as well, because only the front side is what rotates 180 degrees, because the back side is already at 180 degrees. So this only applies to the front side. And what does apply to the back side? Well, if it's already at 180, it now needs to go back to 0. And that's actually it. All right? So let's test it out and then take a look at the code again if we understand it. So this is what it looks like right now. Well, not exactly as we imagined it, right? But we're getting there. Okay, so you see that this one is now flipped and this one is at the front. And when we leave it, this one is on the front and the other one is on the back. And you can see that because the text starts from the right side on the back part. Now, in order to finally create this effect that we have in our final version, they need to be on top of one another, okay? And so how can we do that? Well, we simply use absolute positioning. And we do that on both of them. And so we can do it right here in the card side class, because that's the one that's common to both of them. So position absolute. And we simply want them to start at the top, so top 0, and at the left, so left 0 as well. Now remember, we always have to give the parent a relative position, okay? So position relative. And now we should be almost there. Okay. Now, since we gave them an absolute position, what the elements do is that they basically start fitting to their width. So you see this one is now wide, the red one is wider than the green one because it says front, and the front text is wider than just back text. Okay. And so we need to change that as well. So let's give them a width of 100%. And the final piece of the puzzle is another property that I actually showed you before, but that was just to fix a weird animation error. But this time we really need this property. And the one I'm talking about is called backface visibility. Alright, remember me talking about this one? Well, what this does is that if we set it to hidden, it basically hides the back part of an element. So you saw that when we rotated the card where it said front, it then, as soon as we rotated it, that text started from the right side. And so we were seeing the card from the back side. And so now when we specify this backface visibility to hidden, we will no longer be able to see that back part. And that's actually exactly what we want, right? So let me check that again. And so here we go. Well, actually the perspective is kind of gone. Let me check out what's going on here. And okay, I see what's going on here. You see that? So this card, it has no height anymore right now. So the cards, they have a height of 500 pixels as we defined, but the card does no longer have a height. And why is that? Well, it is because its height collapsed. And that's very similar to what happens when all the elements are floated. But right now, all the elements are on position absolute. And so they're also taken out of the natural flow. Remember when we talked about that? So we took these cards out of their natural flow, and therefore the parent collapsed and lost its height. Now when this happens with floats, we have a clear fix, but with position absolute, there is actually no such thing. There's nothing we can do, at least not with pure CSS. And so what we have to do is to actually specify the same height that we gave to the card itself, okay? And so now we're saying that the height of the card should be 50 and of the sides as well. And so they can have the same height, and with that our perspective should be back. And here you go. So that's exactly the way that the other animation looks like, right? Well, not exactly, it's because we can also use another animation type because, well, so we have the transition here. Remember there's something called the transition timing function, and when we don't specify it, then it simply uses the most simple one, which is a linear animation, but we don't want that, we want ease. And so this animation looks a bit smoother. And again, I'm going to explain better to you what these transition timing functions really mean, how they really work, okay? And I will show you a lot of examples as well. For now, let's just use this. And so with that, our animation should look a bit better. Now we can also get rid now of this weird background colors here as well. Here we can actually put the background color and it should be white. Okay, so color white. And then here on the back, let's take a look at our example. Okay, so now this looks a bit better, in fact. And so let's take a look here at this one. And so you see that in here we have this nice gradient going on from this corner to this one. And these are actually some new colors that we have to add to our color palette. So this yellow and this orange here, and then also these two colors here, so this blue and this like dark blue or pink. So we have these new colors here. And this is just the normal green gradient here in the middle. But the other ones we have to add. So let's put them into our variables file. And let's put them right here. So I'm calling the first one the color secondary. And then light. So it's a light version first. And the color here is FFB 900. So I'm missing the hash here. All right. So I got all of these colors here by getting some inspiration from other websites and other web apps. And if you also want to get some inspiration, see some examples, then I have a lot of websites where you can do that. And you can find them on my resources page. Okay, so I have a couple of links. There are multiple sites out there where you can find inspiration. And that's something that's really important as a web developer and also web designer. So I consider myself that I'm both. And so I like to be on top of that. So the latest design trends, so that I can keep up with industry and then use these trends as well in my own designs, okay? So this is now the tertiary. Okay, so put these colors here in your variables file so that we can now use them here in the card. So we have 3 cards and 3 gradients going on. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we actually need a new modifier here, right? Because we have 3 card side backs. So it's getting a bit more complicated and we have more and more code, but well, that's just how it works. This is a really complex component. Okay, so now we can specify the back in general, and then we will have some very specific code for each of the 3 different cards. Okay, so let's do that. So back, and then the number 1, and then of course we will have some for the next 2 cards. So no background color in here, and here we have a linear gradient. So background color, then linear gradient. So it goes to the right bottom corner, so right bottom, and then the colors that we want. So color secondary light and color secondary dark. All right, so let's check that out. Well, that didn't really work. Sorry, let me check out why that happened. Actually, it's not background color, it is background image. So for a linear gradient, it's image, not color, of course. Well, let me reload it again. And let me now take a look. Inspect. Well, it still has this green color here. So maybe there was again an error with the compilation. And yeah, okay. So what it says here is that I have an undefined variable, color secondary dark. Okay, light and dark. Well, let me check out the light and dark. Okay. Of course, I need to change this. So we have the light and the dark one for both. Okay, probably you had already noticed this error. I just did not. Okay, so sorry about that. And so yeah, that looks amazing, right? Now, just as the finishing touches of this card, let's give it these rounded corners here that we see, and also this very subtle shadow that you see underneath the card. Okay. So border radius of 3 pixels, let's say, and then a nice box shadow. So 0 in the X direction, 1.5 rem in here, then 40 pixels blur, so 4 rem, and then for the color RGBA, as always, color black, this time with a 15%. All right, now you see that we also repeating these kind of shadows here all the time, so we could also do a variable for all of these shadows. But again, I'm not going to go crazy here now and define a variable for everything. But in fact, you can do it, and probably you should do it just to test it out for yourself. And so I think that would be a good idea for you. So find all of the shadows that are the same or at least similar, and then make a couple of variables like shadow 1, shadow 2, and shadow 3. And then you can simply add these here in the box shadow property. All right. Yeah, that looks better, right? And so that is the basic functionality of the card. Now in the next lecture, we're actually going to start styling it. And so we're going to take care of that image you see up there, then this nice orange text box that you have there, which is slightly overlapping the white part. And so yeah, looking forward to do that in the next lecture. let's now continue building the tours section. And this is where we left off after the last lecture. And in this small break, I actually noticed some problem with this card. So with this movement here, and let me show you what happens. So I'm gonna make this here really slow. So like 8 seconds, let's say. And so let's take a look at what happens here. It actually moves in the wrong direction. You see that? We want it to move in the opposite direction, so that then it seems that the card continues moving while the orange sides moves to the front. And right now that's not really what's happening. You see that? So this should move in the opposite direction. Okay? Yeah, so what we want to happen is to not rotate it to 180 degrees, but minus 180 degrees. So basically just in the other direction. And once again, that's what the minus symbol does here. It moves the element in the other direction, just like as if we are setting a margin to a negative value that also moves the element to the other direction, so the opposite direction. So let's check it out now. And so this is what we want, right? So now it's really a moving card. So I had a small mistake in the code. You see that? Now it is actually perfect. Once again, just to make sure, and yep. So in this transition, there's a small moment where we don't see any card, and so in there we can see that it's perfect now this way, right now. Alright, so let's put it back to 0.8, give it a save. And yep, so this looks natural now. Alright, so just a small mistake, but again, that's completely normal to happen for everyone. As long as we fix these before we ship a product, it's no problem. Now let's move on and start styling the card some more. And so basically we have 3 elements on the front side of the card. So let's take a look at them. So we have the background image in the first place, so this image, then the text box, and then the list down there. So 3 parts that I'm going to put here in the markup now. So first one is the card heading. Card heading. Next we have a card picture. And actually let me put the picture first. So card picture. Well, something's wrong here. Well, something weird here going on with my editor, but never mind. Last thing is the card details. Now, one thing about the BEM methodology is that we do not nest element names. Okay, so this here is not a card side picture. Okay, so card, then card side, and card side picture. That could make sense, but that's not how the BEM methodology says we should do it. So these are elements that are not, they should not be dependent here on the side. Okay, so we keep the block, which is card in this case. So the block is kept in the name, but then it's a complete new element down here. Okay. And so we have the picture, the heading, and the details. So details, heading, and the image. Now, as for the image, I'm going to use a background image in CSS actually, and not an IMG element in the HTML. And I'm going to do that because I want to show you some background blend modes. Okay, so some great effects that we can apply on background images, but not on normal images. And so I'm going to just leave this one empty, so no image in here. Well, actually we should put something in here, and so I'll just put a space, and so I'm putting the HTML special symbol for space, which is NBSP. I'm not really sure why that is, but this basically means like an empty space in HTML, okay? So instead of just leaving the div empty, I put this in here. It looks the same, but at least then it's not completely just empty sitting there. Okay, and let's actually start with that picture. And keep in mind that we have 3 cards, so we're gonna have 3 different pictures. And so I need to add here a modifier. Right? So picture 1 here in this case, and then later we will have 2 and 3. So back to our CSS or SASS actually. Let's now come down here and write picture. And so let's add some comments here. Maybe you've been adding comments before to your SASS. So let me just write here that this is basically for functionality. So functionality, and this now is front side styling. So the picture is of course on the front side, so let's style that. And so we select the very first one. So this car picture one here, right? And so now let's give it to start a simple background image. Okay, and so now we have to move up one level. And so now IMG, and the image that I want here is called net5. Now, why do I actually have to move up only one level? Well, I do because I have to assume that this code will be written later in the style.css file, right? So after the SASS code is compiled, it will be written into the style.css file. And so from there, I have to move up one level out of the CSS folder and into the project folder, which is this natives folder. And then from there, I move to the IMG folder. And then in there, we have this net5. So this image here. All right. By the way, I got most or maybe all of these images at a very nice website, which is called unsplash.com, I think. And yeah, right. So here you have a lot of great free images that you can get for free. And there's a lot to explore here. But once again, you have a link to this one and to other similar websites on my resources page. All right, so we have a background image here, and we want to set its background size to cover here, okay? And I'm doing that outside of this selector here, because of course I want this to happen for all of the images. And so instead of repeating it then for the 2 and 3, why not put them here already? So 2 and 3. So if I were to write this in here, then I would have to repeat it for this one and for this one. And that doesn't make much sense. And so I'm applying it just on the more general selector here. All right, let's just take a look. And well, for some reason it's not there. Let's inspect. So the picture. Okay, of course. Well, another small mistake. And now here we go. Now the element is just really small because there are actually no content at all in it, okay? So that's the reason why we only have this very small picture. So once again, we have to define the height here. And I'm setting it to 23 rem. And I came to this number here by experimentation once again. So now it should look better. Okay, that's actually how it's supposed to be. Now about these background blend modes that I talked to you about earlier. What actually is that? Well, the background blend mode property describes how the element's background images should blend. And that's basically it. So imagine we have multiple backgrounds and we want them to blend. And so we can use that property to do that. Now just blending two images wouldn't make much sense, right? And so what we're doing here is to blend the image with a linear gradient, which is also defined as a background image in CSS. And so let's try that out. Okay, so the background image is not just the actual image here, but it also contains a gradient. And I can actually get that one from up here because it's the exact same one. So it's also to the right bottom and with these two yellow colors. So one background and then a comma and the second background. Okay, and if we now take a look, you'll only see the one that's on top, which is the gradient. But that's because we didn't actually blend them, not yet. So, background blend mode. And once again, this is a brand new CSS property, and so it doesn't work at all in Internet Explorer and neither on Microsoft Edge, okay? So only Safari, Firefox, and Google Chrome, of course. So there are many different options here, and I'm going to use screen, okay? And I'm going to show you all the different possibilities in the dev tools. All right, and that's what it looks like. Let's inspect. So, well, for some reason it doesn't work. All right, so now after refreshing, sometimes that's necessary. So let's delete it. And then in here we can see the different possibilities. Well, okay, so color, color burn, color dodge. And so these are all the different blend modes that we have available in CSS. Maybe you're familiar with blend modes from a graphical program like Photoshop or something like that. And so before, if you wanted to have some background blending going on like this, you would have to do it in Photoshop, then export it and use it in CSS. But now with these modern CSS properties, you can do it right in CSS. So it's getting more and more powerful, okay? So we have all of these effects going on. Multiply also looks quite dramatic, I think. Then overlay, saturation. Screen, that's the one that I'm using because it looks, I think, the most normal here. Soft light. And so we're back to the beginning. So color also looks dramatic and great, I think. But again, I'm going with screen here. And so that's the one I'm looking for. Okay. Now maybe noticing up here in the corners of these images, so I cannot touch it, but here in the corners, that they are no longer rounded, right? Well, if I zoom this up a little bit, so let me zoom it really high. So you can see they are no longer rounded. And that's because the image is basically overlapping the parent element. But there's an easy fix. And so on the parent element, which is actually where the border radius is defined, we can set a property that's called overflow and then hidden, okay? Because basically that's what's happening. So the image is overflowing the parent in these corners, okay? So where the corners are, the image should not be. And so we can simply hide these parts. So overflow hidden does that for us. And so now if we zoom in, it should be back to normal. And yeah, we see that it actually works now. At least it looks like it. Let's check it out. So if we had some more border radius here. So you see that now it's working, okay? It's really dramatic, but just to show you that it works now. All right. Now what we also want to happen here on this picture is to have the similar effect that we have on the header. So check it out. So this line here, okay, I cannot hover it, but you see this cut out part, just like here in the header, this part, right? So once again, let's use clip for that. So the clip path property, clip path. And once again, we're defining a polygon here. And note that we can actually use other things different from polygon. For example, circle or ellipsis. And we're actually going to do a circle in one of the next lectures in order to clip a perfect circle. Now in this case, that's not what we want, so a polygon. And I hope you remember how it works. So we define a couple of coordinates starting from the top left corner. And so we want 0, 0 in there. Then the second one is 100% in the x direction. Okay, and 0 in the y direction. Remember that? So let me show it to you. So 0, 0, then 100% in the x direction, but 0 movement in the y direction, so up and down. And now here comes the third coordinate, which will be somewhere here. So this is where the cutting happens. So we will want 100% on the x, and then on the y-axis, something like 80 or 85%. So 100% in the x direction and let's say 85% in the y direction. And then finally, the last coordinate will be again back to 0 in the x direction because it's back to the beginning at 100% in the y direction. Okay, let's check that one out. And yep, so that looks good. Okay, so once again, this clip path here is a very modern CSS property. And in order to actually make it work across all the browsers, we should actually prefix it with the WebKit prefix, so that it works in all browsers like Chrome and Safari as well. Okay, so the same thing here now. So clip path and WebKit clip path. And actually it should be the other way around. So first the prefixed than the official version, because this is just a vendor prefix. So prefix implemented by the different browsers. And actually, since we're doing that, let's also do the same thing here at the header, where we also used a clip path, okay? So let me copy that one. Clip path. All right. Okay, and such as the background blend mode, clip path is not going to work on Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. So if you need to develop for these ones, you can at this point not use these properties, okay? Or you can use them with a fallback, and we're going to take care of that later. So we actually will take care of supporting different browsers in different ways, but let's leave that for later. Okay, and with the picture done, let's now take care of the heading, okay? So it's called cart heading here, okay? So let's do that. So how should it look and where should it be positioned? So let's take a look. And so it's on top of the image. Basically, we wanted to have this nice background, the white big text, and so yeah, let's do that then. Now notice once again that each of these titles have a different background color according to the image and of course to the back side. So let's start with the font size of 2.8 rem, for example, a font weight of 300, text transform to uppercase, and color, remember it was white, so color white. All right, and I think I actually set the color somewhere up here, okay? But remember this was just for testing and this as well. So let's remove that testing part we had set up before. So what should be here? And now actually I'm seeing that I have a div here, but that's not really semantic. So semantic means that we're using the right HTML tag for the right content. And so if it's a heading, we should actually use an H tag. So H4. So we used H1, 2, and 3, and now it's time to use the H4 element on this one. And so it says the first one is the C Explorer. So let's check that out. And well, it's hidden behind here because it's white. So here it is actually. Now remember, we want this to be on top of the image, right? So what can we do? We will use absolute positioning once again. So let's do that. So down here, position absolute. And we want it from the top at 12 rem and from the right side at 2 rem. And also, since we're at it, let's align the text to the right. So we have everything nicely aligned to the right side of the card. So let's see that now. And so now it's almost the way that we want it. Well, not perfectly, but we're going to take care of that right now. Now in order to create this look that we have here with these two lines and with basically the gradient applying on each of them, we need to use a new CSS property called box decoration break. And in order for that to work, I need to create a new element inside of this H4. So again, this will make more sense a bit later. For now, let's just do it this way. So in here, let me simply add a span element here. Okay, so this is just something to wrap around the text card. And I'm going to call this one heading span. And now the C Explorer text goes in here. Also, I will need a modifier class here because I want the 3 different gradients, right? So one yellow, one green, and one blue. And so this is the way I have to do it. So you see it's getting rather complex, such as I was saying in the beginning of the lecture. But since we're building it step by step and really explaining everything on the way, it should not really be a problem, right? So let's copy this one. Or actually we don't need, because we have our SASS nesting. So all we have to do is to add the span here now. Or actually, that's not really a good practice, okay? So let me add heading span, because this is not really a child of the heading. This is a whole new element called heading span. So it's not a modifier of heading, and it's not an element of heading. So it's a new element in the BEM system, okay? And so I will have a separate selector for that one. And now the next thing I want to do is to give it this nice background gradient, okay? And so now I'm selecting the one with the modifier 1. So card heading span 1. And so I want a background image here for the gradient, background image, linear gradient to right bottom. Was writing it outside the parentheses here for some reason. So, and now I want it to be slightly transparent. So I need to use some RGBAs here so that we can still see through the element. So this is the color here for the number 1 as well. So all of the ones have the same yellow colors. And then a .85 alpha value. And then in here it is the dark, also with 85. Okay, so this looks rather complex. Let's break it up a little bit here. All right, so let's take a look now. All right, now let me make this slightly narrower, okay? So give it a width of not 100%, which it has right now because it's a block element, but give it just 75%. Sorry about that. And well, that didn't change anything. Why is that? Let me see what happens if I decrease it even further. Ah, okay, yeah. So it should simply be a smaller value here, okay? So if we go to 100, then it's back to occupying the entire width that it can. So you see that by the blue box. Now by just adding some padding here, let's say 10 pixels top bottom and 1.5 rem in here, then that should actually fix it, because this will create some more space. And so yeah, so here we go. And so now this already looks pretty close to the end result that we want, right? Now you see that we added the padding here, okay? So you see the padding going around on this entire element. But you see that here besides the A, we don't have any space like we have on the other side beside the T. And down here at the E, in the beginning of Explorer, we also don't have any padding. And that's because this element is treated as one line of text. And so basically as one element where the padding gets applied on the left and on the right side. And the left is left of the and the right side is right of the Explorer word. So what we want is to actually treat these two entities, like these two lines, as if they were two different elements, right? And there's actually a way of doing that. And so that magic happens when we use the box decoration break property. So box decoration break, and we're going to set it to clone. And actually this doesn't work right now at Google Chrome without the WebKit prefix, okay? So we need this prefix here in order to make it work. And so let's take a look, and here we go. So that's how we want this to look like. Let me actually disable here this hover effect. We can do so by clicking here, then we click here on hover, and so then we can see the styles which apply when we hover. They should be somewhere down here. Well, actually, this is not where we want to hover, of course. We hover the entire card. So sorry, imagine that we hover this, and now we can disable the styles. Well, at least we should be able to. Ah yeah, so here we go. So this part rotates, and where's the other one? Yeah, it's the back side. And so now we should be able to touch it without it rotating all the time here like crazy. So let's take away this property here and see what happens. So this is what it looked like before. So we didn't have the space here that we wanted, and not here, but only here in the beginning and here at the end. And to fix that, we use this property. For some reason it doesn't work without checking and unchecking this one, but now here we are. So now these are like two completely different entities, and that's what the clone does. So what clone does is to simply apply all the declarations that we have in the selector, which in this case is only the padding, to all of the boxes that are created by an element, just like in this case. So one element, two boxes, both styled now in the same way, both with the same padding. All right, and so we have that part as well. So 2 or 3 parts are done, and now the final one is just this list. And that should be the easiest part. So let's do that real quick before we end up with a 1-hour video here, okay? So simply a list, and so we create a UL element. Now I could go crazy here with the BEM notation and add cart list now, and then to all of the items in there, I could add cart item, and so we would end up with a bunch of different class names. But let's not do that. And let's very simply create an unordered list in here that we can then select with the cart details selector. Okay, so UL, and then remember that with Emmet, we can do it like this. So we can create some child elements, and remember that we want 5 LI elements in there. And so we can write LI times 5, hit tab, and here we go. So the first one says 3-day tour, hitting tab, moves me to the next one, okay? Up to 30 people, 2 tour guides, sleep in cozy hotels, and finally the difficulty is easy. So an easy tour is this one. So cart details, and so let's now go style that one. So we have the picture, the heading, and now the cart details. Okay, so in the details we have the UL, so we simply have to write UL here, and then in here we have the LIs, right? So list style none, this is pretty standard, we basically do it all the time when we use an unordered list. We say we want it to have a width of 80% so that it doesn't occupy all of the space in here, okay? So remember, this is what it looks like. And we want all of these items then to have a line under them. So they should be slightly underlined, but we don't want that to go completely from the left to the right side. And so this complete list should only have a width of 80%. And so this way we take care of that. Okay, and now just the item. You saw that it had center text. So text align center. Font size 1.5 rem. Let's give it also some padding. And then the border at the bottom of 1 pixels. Now we don't want this to happen on all of them, but on all of them except the last one. So how do we do that? We already learned it and used it multiple times by now. So we say that we want the LI elements that are not the last child. I want them to be this subtle gray, this EEE gray. Okay, and since we're using a color, let's create a new variables. So we have one light color already, but this one is a little bit darker. So we use a new variable for that one. Let me copy it right away. So all we have to do now is to paste it in here. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so we see these 80% width going on, but of course this should be in the center of the card, not pushed all the way to the left side. And we should also probably have some space here, well, in the beginning basically of the list. Okay, so let's take care of that. Basically we can set a padding in here of 3 rem, and that will take care of that. And then remember that we want this UL here, which has this 80% width, to be centered in the container. And so how do we do that? Do you know a good way of doing that? Well, whenever I can, I like to use the most simple methods. And so I'm not going to go with absolute positioning or stuff like that and using a simpler way. So we're centering a block element inside of a block element. And so the simplest way is to simply use margin 0 auto. So 0 top and bottom, and left and right automatically calculated by the browser. So I already explained that to you when we did the rows in the grid system, right? So let's take a look at it now, and that looks pretty good to me. Maybe we want some more space down there, and we can do that by actually increasing the entire card. So let's add some 10 pixels, for example. Maybe even some more 10 pixels. And remember, we have to set it here in 2 places, because one, we have the height of the entire card, and then for both the sides. And so, yeah, now it looks good. It looks fantastic, in fact. So the front part is ready. Now all we have to do is to style the back part, but that should be a lot more easy than the front part, okay? So that's what we're going to do in the next lecture. And now the third and final part of building these rotating cards in the tours section. So this is what the back part looks like. It's just the text saying only $297, and then down here one of these white buttons, which we already have. So we have one single box that is all of this content here, which I'm calling the call to action box, which is nicely centered vertically and horizontally inside of the card. So that shouldn't be all too hard, right? So the back part. So the CTA, so call to action box, which is easier to write. And actually I forgot the card block name here, of course, that needs to be here. And so what do we have in here? So we should also have a small box for the price. So where we say the only and then the $297. So a box for both these things. So let's call it card price box, very simple. And then simply the only. So I will make this a paragraph, okay, because it's just a word of text. So card price only. So only, and then another paragraph, card price value. So these may sound like a bit weird names. Well, it's not really easy to find all these names for all these elements we have in our interfaces. So we have the card price box, and then after that we have the button, remember? So we have an A element with the class button and pointing to nowhere, and it says book now. All right, and remember that we had I think 2 types of buttons. Let me check that out actually. So we had the button and the white button, okay? There will probably be a green one sometime, but okay, for now we have the white one. So I should also add here the button white. And actually it's 2 for the modifier, so button white in here. So card CTA contains all of this. So let's now style card CTA. So front side styling, just to keep this nicely organized here. So card CTA. And remember, we're going to position it with absolute positioning. So position, absolute, and then our center method. Remember how that works? So top, we move it 50% down. Left, we move it 50% of the parent's elements width to the left. And then we transform it back to the exact center. So translate minus 50%, and this time of the width of the element, not the parent, and 50% of the height as well, minus 50% to put it back up. So the exact same thing as we did in the header. Let's just quickly check that out before we move on. Well, something is not working 100%. Well, now it's on the other side, so it's a bit difficult to check it out. Okay, but we can still see it here. It's like invisible, but I see what's going on here. It's here. So there's a small mistake. Okay, and that should fix it. Now moving on, we have the price box. And we also have the price only. And the price value. Okay, the price value should be really big. Remember that one? So let's put it to 6 rem. And then really a thin text. So font weight 100. Because usually when we have really huge text, it looks better when we then make it really thin instead of just leaving it like a big and bold text, okay? And then the only part can be quite small actually, so font size 1.4 rem. And to uppercase. So let's take a look right now. All right, so that looks quite cool actually already. We just have to center this here, make the text white, and then add some margin here. Okay, and for that, the price box is perfect because it contains these two price only and price value, right? And so we can do text align center here. We can set a margin to the bottom of 8 rem, and we can also set a color to white here, because remember, the other elements will then inherit this property. So color white, and we should be good to go. Then there's only one problem left to fix, which is this button here, but I think I know why that is. So let me actually inspect this. But first of all, let me do something. So this is the back side of the card. If we remove this rotate here, okay, then we can actually manipulate this. So what you're seeing here is that the button is adapting to the width of this CTA box here, okay? And that's why then the text is broken up into lines. So all we have to do is to really give this some width, and then that should eventually fix it, okay? So CTA, just give it some width. Maybe not 100%, but like 90%. That should be okay. So I also noticed that here is an error. So price, somehow I wrote prince, okay. But now I believe that it's okay. Well, still not really, because it's now not centered. That's also an easy fix. We just have to make text align center here, and we can actually copy that from here. So that should work now. All right, so really nice. So that was easier. Now all we have to do is to actually create the other two cards and then put the green button in here. So these are the other two cards. Let me show them to you. So it says 497 on the back, 897 on the back, this one, and on the front they look like this. So what I want you to do is to now go ahead and actually build these cards by yourself. I think I already gave you the colors. Yeah, I did. I know I did. And so you're ready to actually do this all by yourself. Well, except maybe for the images. So you don't have the names of the images, so let me give them to you. So it's here. So I can give you the images of the backgrounds. They are simply called 6 and 7, okay? So then all you have to do is to change the color names here. So this is the text here. Go ahead and copy it, and I'll see you back here in a second. So I hope you managed to make it work. So I'm now really quickly going to do it as well here, okay? So one column here, and actually I don't think it's all of this. So we want this column. So I can copy all of this in this way. Oh, and actually I already have the columns here. So sorry about that. Let's just copy the card then. Give it some space. There's only one R. So the forest hiker. 7, 40, and 6. And it's medium. And it also costs $4.97. And of course, it's picture 2, span 2, and back 2. And now the same thing down here. The Snow Adventurer. And it's a 5-day tour, up to 15, 3 sleep in provided tents again. And this one is hard, and so it's more expensive, $8.97. All right, and now in the CSS, so we have number 2 and 3. So here it's the green one is the primary, and this is the tertiary. The same thing here. And of course this one here. And finally, well, where's the other one? Ah, okay, yeah, it was up here. And finally, the tertiary color. And let's hope that it works now. And it does. So this is my version here. It's not the original version. So here we go. This is exactly it. So 3 cards, all rotating, all looking amazing. Now all there's left to do actually is to put this button here. Okay, so let's do that. And that's the final thing we have to do in this section. So right here after the row, I believe that's the row. So right here after the row, it's where we're gonna put it then. And how should we do it? Well, remember that the button is centered and that it has some margin between the cards and the button. And so this is actually a similar case to this heading that we have here going on. So we simply put a div here, then we had some helper classes which helped us. And that's what we're gonna do now, so let me just copy that and put it here. So we want this to be centered. Of course, no H2 here this time, but instead is an anchor link. So a dot button, pointing to nowhere again. And in here, discover all tours. So this would lead to some page where all the tours are listed, but which we don't have in our project, of course. And for example, then on this page here, there could be all of the available tours, and then we could reuse all of these cards here. And so that's why we did them as components, right? Now, this here is for margin bottom big, but we want something for margin to the top. So let's add another helper class, so another utility. And let's simply call it margin top. Why not? Margin top. And so this way we don't have to create a whole new style just to position this button where we want it to be, okay? Okay, actually we have to say that it's a green button. And I think we don't have it already. I think it's only the white one that we have. And yeah, it seems so. So, green. And here it's called color primary, because that's our green color. And so that should work now already. Let's check it out. And yeah, here we go. There's just one thing that we have to change, which is the color, which is not gray dark in here in the green one, but here it's actually white. And the rest should be perfect. So let's close it. Close this one as well. And so, yeah. So here we go. That's it. It's the title, it's the boxes, and it's the button. Oh, and now we said we should fix this huge space here, so let's finish with that. So maybe 15 is enough on the bottom. And yeah, so that looks good. Now just this space here seems to be a bigger than this one here, while in fact it's also 80 pixels, but I guess it looks different because of the shadow here. So it gives us a different impression. So let's change the big one here to, oh, let's actually create a new one. Why not? So we are more consistent this way. So one is called huge, and huge has 10 rem. So we want a huge margin for the top. And then finally, one thing that I noticed here is that these corners here are no longer round. And that actually happens because of the clip path property that we used here. So this clip path in Google Chrome, it breaks the overflow that we set for that. So remember, we actually set the overflow hidden so that these corners that are overflowing the parent element are actually hidden. But for some reason, when we then use the clip path here on that very image, then the overflow no longer works. So we have to now set this manually, but that's not a big deal. So border top left radius 3 pixels, border top right. And this should be the final line of code of this. Let's check out how many lines we wrote. Well, actually not 200, but 160, but still not so bad. If you put that together with the HTML, it's probably like 300 lines of code. All right, and so now the cards are finalized. You see that the borders are now back to being rounded. And yeah, it's overall a very nice design. And this was, once again, very great progress for you. Lots of new tools for you, lots of stuff to think about. And that is the whole point of this course. Hello, great to have you back in the course. Let's start working on our next section now, where basically customers can tell about their experience with natures. So you're gonna learn here how to make text flow around shapes using the shape outside and float properties together, and how to apply a filter to images. Then you're gonna create a background video filling the entire section. And for that, you're gonna learn how to use the HTML video element and how and when to use the object fit property. So you see that once more, this section is full packed with new stuff for you to learn. So this is what the section looks like. So here we have like a testimonial of this person, of Mary Smith, and then down here another one. Now what's special about this is that we have this round image here, so this shape, and then this text flows around that shape. And so that's what we're gonna do in this lecture. You also see that we have this style here with this non-rectangular design again, so this line that you see here and on this side as well. So that's a design pattern that's repeating across this web page. And then of course you also see that we have this background video here going on. And so you're also going to learn how to do that. Then in the end there's just a small button here, which could then lead to another page where the user could read more stories, okay? So let's start once again with the title, so with the H1 element here. Then we style this entire section, but not the background video. Okay, we're gonna leave that one to the very end. And then we can also start styling this component here. So this is gonna be a story component. So let's do that. Closing the card here. So let's create a new section. Section stories. Then again, we will get our H2 element here, so our secondary heading. So let's grab that from here. This time it says, we make people genuinely happy. All right, and now down here, let's start a new row. Actually, this is all not well formatted. Okay, let's start a new row